Good evening. Another Wednesday night, and we welcome you to Live United. Thanks for joining us. Tonight we have a special show with New Hampshire Pro Bono, and I bet you're wondering exactly what that means. So I'm fortunate to have with me tonight Virginia. Ginny Martin is with New Hampshire Pro Bono and is the Associate Director there. So Ginny, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
So I started at the top of the show by saying, I bet you'll wonder what New Hampshire Pro Bono is.
Yes, very interesting. New Hampshire Pro Bono, Pro Bono means for the public good. New Hampshire Pro Bono is an organization that concentrates on coordinating and leveraging the volunteer services of private attorneys. Private attorneys are encouraged to do pro bono work. It's called pro bono work, to do free legal work for low-income people who otherwise would not have access to legal services.
So tell me a little bit about how this all started, because it's kind of interesting to think that I think when people think about lawyers, they don't oftentimes think about them providing free service and pro bono service. So tell me how this started.
Well, in New Hampshire, we've been in operation approximately 36 years. And the formal program started through a special model demonstration grant from the federal government. And since that time, we have built and strengthened the program. There is a recognition that there are many services, there are many issues that low-income people may have that require legal intervention to solve. Yet, if they can't afford to pay for an attorney, how are they going to do that? It's a movement that is nationwide. There are programs all over the country. We like to say, and we believe pretty strongly, that we have one of the best programs. In fact, very interestingly, the director of the American Bar Association Center on Pro Bono has been invited to go to Kurdistan, of all places, and he contacted me for information about New Hampshire's pro bono program. He is going to be using our program as a model to illustrate the kind of value and work and organization about our own New Hampshire program, half a world away.
Wow, that's really neat. You mentioned that it's really to provide legal services to those who may not otherwise be able to access those services. So what would people come to New Hampshire Pro Bono for?
Well, one of the things that is important for people to know right off the bat is that we're talking about civil, non-criminal legal issues, first of all. So if someone does have a criminal issue, those and they're low income, that would be the purview of the New Hampshire Public Defender Program. And I believe people can contact that program directly or get information at their local court about that. So these are what are called civil legal problems, and it can be a wide range. Many of them involve family law issues, domestic violence, housing, and foreclosure, for example, can be wills and estates. We even have a low-income taxpayer project for people who have tax controversies with the Internal Revenue Service. So there is a fairly wide array. I would say what we really look at is legal intervention what kind of impact is it going to have for that particular individual? And then what we do is we match that individual, if they qualify for our services, with a volunteer attorney.
Now, is there a website or way to contact you so that people can find out exactly what kind of services and whether they meet the criteria of the program?
Well, that's a really good question. There are really various avenues for people to find out about us. I did want to mention that we are located at the New Hampshire Bar Association. In New Hampshire, all attorneys are required to be members of the New Hampshire Bar, and the New Hampshire Bar has a commitment to the pro bono program. So we're located with the New Hampshire Bar. The New Hampshire Bar has a website, which is www.nhbar.org, and that website has a whole section for the public with a lot of information, and it does have information about the pro bono program, also, which I'll get into in a little bit, the special projects dedicated to particular issues that we operate. In terms of actually accessing legal services, there are a couple of ways that people can do that. One is to call one of our partner agencies called the Legal Advice and Referral Center, and they have an 800 number. It's 800-639-5290. Now, very interestingly, we work with them on what is called online intake. They have an application for services that can be completed online any time of the day. If people don't have access to their own computers, we encourage people to go to their public library, and that is at nhlegalaid.org or nhlegalaid.org. So fill out an application which will be reviewed to see if they qualify for assistance. We do have income guidelines, as I mentioned before. This is a program that is designed to assist the people with low incomes, and it's based on household income. Just to give you some sense of what the who might qualify financially, I had this. Here we go. For example, one person, it's around the 21,000 figure. For a family of three, it's around 37,000. It's 187% of federal poverty guidelines for people to qualify for pro bono services.
Now, do you have any services for those who may not meet those guidelines that people can still reach out to you for?
That is a really good question. We don't necessarily through the pro bono program itself, although I do want to say, is that we receive lots of different funding from lots of different sources, including the Monadnock United Way, of course, for which we are very, very grateful. That helps support our services in this part of the state. Sometimes we have a federal grant, and that grant will say, these are the guidelines that you must use for this program. So it might, with our tax project, for example, the guidelines are actually higher than our normal guidelines. So it can really vary depending upon the funding source. But generally, it's the guidelines I mentioned earlier, the around 21 for one person, 37 for a family of three. The Bar Association itself has several programs. If people go to the bar's website, New Hampshire Bar Association, the website, which I can repeat again, it's nhbar.org, they will find other resources. For example, there is, the bar operates what we call the reduced fee referral program. That program is for people who are above the guidelines for pro bono, and below, and I didn't bring those figures with me, below 275% of poverty. Anyway, it's to meet this gap, and and that can be for civil or criminal law help. So what is interesting about that program, which I also happen to administer, is that attorneys who we coordinate through that project cannot charge more than $80 per hour for their services. Now, given attorneys may regularly charge $175, $200 an hour, $80 an hour is quite an advantage for people to be able to get some legal help.
So many ways to actually access service, and it sounds like New Hampshire is doing quite a job of trying to serve the needs of the public in terms of their legal needs. You mentioned that New Hampshire Pro Bono focuses on that civil
Yes.
Area, but that there is options through that New Hampshire Bar
Right.
Association for both the civil and the criminal. You also have given some contact information. I want to remind the public that you can also reach out and be able to access these services by calling 211 here in the state of New
Yes.
Hampshire, which is a referral line and can refer you on to whichever the appropriate service might be. So, Ginny, when your lawyers are working with folks, what's probably one of the biggest issues that they encounter that they're dealing with in the public and trying to serve them?
Again, there is quite an array of issues. I would say domestic violence is, unfortunately, one of the larger issues that we see. We do collaborate with all of the crisis centers around the state, including the Monadnock Center for Violence Prevention. We have a special project that's devoted to the need for a protective order with the court. That project, which has been in operation, it's part of Pro Bono, it's been in operation for maybe 24 years now, is called DOVE, the Domestic Violence Emergency Project, or DOVE. Through that project, we train and we recruit and train attorneys. We work with crisis center advocates. They provide some of the training. It's important for attorneys to know about the cycle of domestic violence, to understand the important non-legal aspects of domestic violence, as well as the law. Those attorneys that we recruit and train, and it's very interesting collaboration, are then put on panels for their local crisis centers. So here it's with the Monadnock Center that the attorneys that we work with who have signed on and been trained to do this, they're on a panel that then the local crisis center can use. They're the ones that call the attorneys. They have their panel of attorneys that we oversee. So they'll call on those attorneys when they have a client, because they're the ones that, they're directly seeing the folks that come in the door. So they'll call on those attorneys as needed to represent qualified individuals at a final restraining order hearing to obtain an order that can be, restraining the abuser from having contact with the individual. Also, what is really important about that order or going to court, having representation, is that it's possible also to receive, as part of this, an order for child support, which can be really, really critical, the economic piece of it. It can be an order for the custody of the children, visitation. We use different words in the legal profession these days, parenting time, that sort of thing. But it can be expansive to cover the needs that someone may have as they're really trying to extricate themselves from an abusive relationship and reestablish themselves. I actually have a story. It's a local attorney, because it's important to remember with pro bono, we serve all of the towns and the cities in the Monadnock region, but we are statewide. We serve all areas of the state. What we do is we recruit attorneys to provide services locally. So we have dozens of attorneys in this region providing services, and we match people here who in need of services with our volunteer attorneys. I'm thinking about one of our Dove attorneys who represented a woman locally who was being pretty badly physically abused and emotionally abused. He was able to secure a restraining order for her, get her the child support she needed. She told us that she had decided to go back to school. She knew that she needed to get some education, get some training to be able to support herself and her children. She credited her Dove or pro bono attorney with really giving her the courage, as she called it, and the confidence to do that. As she said, having someone stand up for her when she needed that kind of service really helped her to understand that she could stand up for herself. So she did go back to school.
That's a great story. You know, when I think about the well-being assessment we did here in the Monadnock region, it was a joint effort between corporations and charitable foundation and the United Way. We knew that child welfare was an issue, that domestic issues were a little bit higher in the Monadnock region than in other parts of the state, but that educational attainment and that economic opportunity were all important factors in providing that whole web that really supports the individual. And that's a perfect example of somebody who received a service and to address welfare issues and safety issues, and it resulted in her being in a better economic situation, it sounds like, and being able to pursue her education. So a nice sort of gives you that full picture of how it all interweaves together, and how sometimes just intervening in that one little place can make a difference in all of those different aspects of life.
Right. Children are considered secondary victims. It's so important to make sure that those children are able to move into a healthier environment, because their futures are on the line and what's going to happen to them. So it's really critical. There have been national studies that have shown that legal intervention in domestic violence may be one of the most critical ways to stop the cycle of abuse, because when lawyers are involved, getting the child support or use of a car, those kinds of things, it's the economics of it that can really make a difference. It takes so much courage for people to leave abusive relationships when, even if they feel like, well, maybe I'm going to get some child support, but not having, sound economic footing, financial footing, can prevent some people from leaving. So we try to address some of those needs as well.
So I want to sort of flip it now to the lawyer side of things, because it's very interesting that this type of service is provided, and that's provided pro bono. Why do your lawyers get involved?
Well, that is such a good question because I'm always curious about that myself, and sometimes I will just ask them. I mean, it's considered a professional responsibility to give back, to provide free service. Pro bono, synonymous with free. It means for the public good, but we use it as, it means free legal services. So professional responsibility, but can be for some. Their parents really modeled giving back to the community. I remember talking to one attorney whose mom was a nurse. She was always helping out for free members of her community. Some people, it may be for religious reasons, that it's part of their religious ethos to give to those in need in their communities. So I think it's really a host of reasons. Sometimes for some attorneys, we give the carrot of providing them with reduced cost or free training. So they see it as a way to really learn and get established, learn different topics. So I think it's really all over the map. Some believe, well, one of their things when they start practicing law, they want to get involved in the bar association, the activities of the bar, because to be a professional, that's what it means. Lots of different reasons. We're fortunate in New Hampshire. I think volunteerism is higher than it is in some parts of the country. There is that belief that one has a responsibility to those people who live around us, and particularly people who may not have had the advantages. I have a board member of the pro bono program, and who is an amazing woman, does a lot of free work. And she said, well, I like to think that if someone in my family had an issue and they didn't have the money to pay to get it resolved, that there would be services there for them.
I think that's a sort of a mentality, especially in the Monadnock region, that when you give because you care.
Yes.
But you also want to know that, again, that whole safety net, that web of service could be available to you in your time of need or to someone that you know in their time of need. So really an important piece. And I can imagine also makes them just feel good about the work that they do.
Exactly. That's just it. And sometimes what we do survey our attorneys and we survey our clients. I have an email from a client I want to share with you in a minute. Some of our attorneys will write back and say, thank you for sending this person my way. I really enjoyed working with this person. I learned a lot too. I think that's the other piece sometimes. It's not just the professional who is providing something or the volunteer. They also are receiving in return. They're doing it not expecting anything in return, yet oftentimes I think they're even surprised at how gratifying and satisfying it may be for them. I just wanted to share another client story. This was an email from a client, and it's really interesting, sort of the viewpoint. And this was a formerly middle-class person, whose financial situation had changed, and so qualified for pro bono, and kind of assumed, oh, these are free services, wouldn't be as good as, the services that he had been able to pay for at some point in the past. And said, working with you was exactly the opposite. And this was something he had written actually to his attorney. You spend a lot of time You maintained communication, and very interestingly, you acted as an educator to make sure I was confident, comfortable, and informed about the process. He goes on to say that I cannot tell you how embarrassing it is to fall upon the hard times we have had, he and his family, and to have to seek the help of others. However, this made all the difference when it came to my pro bono attorney. You were prepared, informed, helped us a great deal. In closing, all I can do is offer you my gratitude and that of my family. I am confident that things will turn around for us, and when they do, the best I can offer you is that I will double my efforts to help others as a tribute to you and what you've done for my family. He also wanted to go on to thank one of our staff members, saying for her efforts on my family's behalf, her humanity and care shone through what was truly an embarrassing moment in my life of having to ask for assistance from others.
You know, that's another great example of a client story, because I think oftentimes people are afraid to reach out, particularly if their life situation has changed fairly dramatically. And we have more and more families in that situation. The show previous to this, we talked about fuel services and weatherization, and that's almost tripled in the increase in numbers of needing those kinds of services. And I would guess, you've probably seen an increase as the economic times and hardship occurred for a lot of people, and that's a story that exemplifies that, really. But you have these lawyers who are benefiting themselves. They're benefiting the public through their volunteerism, and they're benefiting themselves by giving and being an advocate for people, which is really the service you're providing these. You're providing strong advocacy and strong service. I know we talked at the beginning of the show about what some of your needs are, and you have a need for more lawyers.
We do. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Recruitment of attorneys is constant for us. Attorneys retire, they move out of state, they unfortunately pass away. So we are constantly needing to replenish our volunteers. For some time, we had noted in this region that there weren't many younger lawyers moving into the area. I think that's changed a little bit. We have noticed a number of newer lawyers, and we try to recruit them early on, get them involved, and we use some of the more seasoned attorneys to help us do that and help instill. It's really a culture. It's a culture of giving back. It's a culture of understanding that lawyers have skills, training that others don't have, and others may need and some can't afford, that there's a responsibility to give back. One of the things you mentioned just a moment ago, the downturn in the economy, and it seems like recovery is slow, very slow in some areas of the state. One of the special projects that we developed in response to an urgent need that we saw actually all over the state and in this area, of course, as well, is foreclosure. We, with partners, and I'll get into partnerships a little bit in a minute, we have a foreclosure relief project that has brought together legal services programs, 211, home ownership counselors, to try to help homeowners in crisis or to address the aftermath of foreclosure. So that's another area. And people can call 211 actually if they are in need of services around foreclosure, mortgage foreclosure, and they are able to get them directed to the right program, whether someone is looking for a modification of their mortgage, or they need legal help to try to stop a foreclosure, or they went through a foreclosure, there's something on their credit record now that's preventing them. We had someone who couldn't get a student loan for his daughter, help her get a student loan. There are many ramifications of foreclosure, so we try to deal both, help people if staying in their home is going to be possible, but if it's not, and sometimes unfortunately may not be, help them secure what we call a soft landing, help them with all of the elements and try to get them in the best position they can for going forward and stabilizing themselves.
You know, it's interesting because as you talk about that, the whole economic hardship piece and for example, the foreclosure service that you're providing. Sometimes when we intervene in a situation like that, we end up intervening in their whole life. And it
Yes.
may reduce that domestic violence, so you don't have to intervene in that place. And, you know, want to remind people that when you feel like you're in need, reach out.
Oh,
The
definitely.
services are there. You know, at the very least, pick up the phone, call 211. Have them connect you with
Yes.
whoever is going to be the best person to intervene and give you that starting place. You may end up with Ginny. Ginny's going to talk about folks that she collaborates with. You may end up with one of them, but potential is there that you'll be connected to all of those services somehow. And we do have quite a safety net of services here in the Monadnock region. You know, I know that times have been tough in terms of funding for programs, and we've certainly seen, you know, that be difficult, and we've seen things disappear. But we still have a lot of good things in place, and so I encourage you to reach out early, don't wait. So I want to talk about some of your collaborators, because you do have some really interesting collaborations and things that, like I said, people can reach out in different places and they may end up connecting to you somehow.
Exactly. As I mentioned earlier, the local crisis center, Monadnock Center for Violence Prevention, really a key partner for us. We could not operate our program, the Dove program, without them. And this is how it sometimes works with our partnerships. It depends upon what the particular program or need may be. With Dove, Domestic Violence Emergency Project, where we, again, recruit and train attorneys to provide representation for victims in court to help them get those important restraining orders. Well, the advocates at the crisis centers, as you mentioned, it's holistic. There are other needs that person has for safety plan, for securing other housing, and maybe transitional housing, for dealing with the emotional upheaval, those kinds of issues. So those advocates help deal with a lot of those issues so that the attorneys can focus on the legal problems, knowing that the victims have that kind of support in place. Really critical, wonderful partnership. That's one example. Another example with our foreclosure relief project is that we work with home ownership counselors, and people can go to homehelp.org, or the governor's website has a lot of information about foreclosure resources. The home ownership counselors are the ones who are equipped and trained to actually do the loan modification documents, to meet with someone to help figure out, do they qualify for a loan modification. Lawyers, what they may be doing is legally stopping that foreclosure to give the homeowner the opportunity to work with a home ownership counselor to pursue a modification to try to reduce their mortgage payments and that maybe make the difference in allowing them to stay in their homes. I remember one case here in the Monadnock region, and this often happens where, both husband and wife are both working. One person either loses a job or has their hours cut way back. In this case, I believe one person had lost the job, so the income was not quite half of what it had been, significantly less. What we were able to do is handle the legal side while they worked with someone to modify their loan, and then they were able to keep their house. Doesn't always work that way, but if there is that opportunity, then we can help with that. There's studies that have shown that children, the household, if a family goes through a foreclosure, it has a big impact on the entire family. The children may have to go to a new school. Their grades drop. Also, there's the blight in the neighborhood. If you have, houses left vacant, it affects everybody.
Yeah, it's so interesting how it's all connected to each other, and really, again, if we can intervene in one place, we're just potentially having impact in so many different areas of both the individual's life and ultimately our community and the fabric of our community. So I know you also work with New Hampshire Legal Assistance.
We do.
And, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that relationship.
That is one of our very, very important relationships. Sometimes people wonder, well, why do you have these two legal services programs in New Hampshire? New Hampshire Legal Assistance, also a recipient of funding from the Monadnock United Way, also serving this area. They have a model where the staff provides the service. They have paralegals, they have attorneys who directly take the cases. They handle, we work together so that there's not an overlap in services. So they're using staff, we use volunteers. There's not enough staff by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, they've suffered a lot of funding losses, and they have shrunk, but they're still very vital in, providing lots of wonderful services. So we divide it up. They do, when it comes to something like helping tenants, they focus on public housing. We focus on private housing, that kind of thing. We collaborate with domestic violence. If there's not an available volunteer attorney, then New Hampshire Legal Assistance will step in and provide an attorney. They are able to go to the state legislature and educate legislators about those issues that impact low-income people. They are able to do lawsuits where there are lots of people who are impacted by an issue, and New Hampshire Legal Assistance may take on that issue. So we divide it up, and unfortunately, even with the two organizations, we fall far short of meeting all the legal needs of low-income people in the state. There, unfortunately, just isn't enough funding, but what we do is really maximize the resources that we have working together. With volunteer attorneys, they have their own practices, so they may not be able to step in as quickly as New Hampshire Legal Assistance, except for a limited type of service, like with our Dove project, going to court to get that restraining order. So there are lots of ways we work together. It's really a very, very important collaboration. We collaborate too with an entity called LARC. We mentioned they do the screening for a lot of our cases, sort of general cases around debt relief is a big issue these days for people, particularly seniors. It's very sad to see that. So the Legal Advice and Referral Center, or LARC, is the entity that kind of takes in a lot of cases and then based on priorities, based on needs and available resources, they will send cases to New Hampshire Legal Assistance. They send cases to pro bono, and they are also able to provide people with oftentimes on-the-spot advice. They don't provide the full representation that New Hampshire Legal Assistance and pro bono will do.
So is there a message that you really want to get out to the community about utilization of pro bono, or how to reach you, or the purpose and the impact of your work?
Well, as you have mentioned, one of the things is, don't wait, reach out. Maybe it ends up not being a legal problem. You can be directed somewhere else to another resource, as you mentioned. But legal problems usually don't improve with age, and it's better to reach out sooner rather than later. I also want to really, thank the donors to the United Way for helping to support such valuable services, because what we do, an important message is, we leverage volunteer resources. Every dollar of funding we receive, we leverage $4 or $5 in donated legal services. Not only that, once those attorneys' services, then they're able to often achieve results for people that have either a direct financial impact for that family, like getting child support, huge financial benefit to the family, saving someone's house. Domestic violence, again, we've talked a lot about that. There are studies that show that by preventing one incident of domestic violence, that may save like $5,000 in community policing, medical care. So there are all of these impacts, layers of impact. So starting with us and the leveraging that we do, and in turn the impacts that has for the individual, for the community as well. So it really, it's a winning combination on many, many, many levels. So it is, to reach out. We have great volunteers in the Monadnock region. I want to thank volunteer attorneys, and if you're not a volunteer and you're an attorney in this region, please call me directly. You're a member of the bar, so you can find me easily on the bar's website. So I encourage you to do that as well.
So Ginny, I want to really thank you for joining us tonight. And I just want to emphasize and do a shout out there to you young lawyers that are moving into the community to get involved. This is a great opportunity to give, to volunteer, yes, and to be an advocate for people in need and to make a real difference in people's lives.
Exactly.
And I want to thank you and New Hampshire Pro Bono for being a great service that's doing a lot in the Monadnock region to keep people in their homes, to keep people safe, to be serving our public and connecting our public to addressing their needs. So I thank you, audience. I want to remind you to be part of Living United, and you can do that by giving, volunteering, and advocating for people out there, whether they're your neighbor, your family member, or yourself. But connect, reach out early, don't wait. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.